meeting is being recorded.
All right, Jake, my friend, how you been?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to see you again. Good to be here.
It is. I feel like we had a really good conversation for your podcast. I'm really looking forward to picking it back up and doing chapter two.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I enjoyed our conversation, learning about who you are, kind of some of the things that you've gone through, what you're doing, and I love what you're doing with the actual campfire that we've got here in front of us. It's fantastic. I love it.
I think it's a beautiful setting, to be honest with you. Because we get around a campfire with the idea that we're gonna just talk freely, share stories, and that's essentially what a podcast is about.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what my podcast's all about is hearing people's stories and their journey and what they go through, and I love it. So I think this atmosphere is perfect for that. You've got the smoke going, the fire going. I mean, I can't think of anything better. You have a campfire setting, and yes, you do. Absolutely. I love it.
Sometimes you got to live what you do, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So when we first connected, you got to learn all about me. I want to talk a little bit about your background. Tell me where you've been through and how that journey has manifested and brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I was raised really well. I had a couple of great parents, that raised me well. Some brothers, sisters. Kind of just did the normal, routine. Went to school, got went on to college, got a college degree, got married, had some children. Just kind of did what in my mind was the normal thing that you're supposed to do. Get a job, pay the bills, have a family, white picket fence type of scenario. And everything was fine and dandy with that. I was never completely 100% satisfied with what I was doing. I ended up getting into the trade show convention industry, which is a great career. I've loved my career in the trade show industry. I still work in that industry. Got to meet all kinds of people, got to see all kinds of different things. So it was a great career that way. But then, COVID happened, and that kind of changed everything because all of a sudden there's no more live events. And that's what I did. And so I lost a little bit of myself, a little bit of my identity when I wasn't working anymore. Because all of a sudden I'm like, this is what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to, work trade shows and conventions, and now they're not having them anymore. Who am I? And I really felt lost. And it was a tough time for me. And I know a lot of other people went through it as well. And so I think that was a little bit hard too, was dealing with the fact that so many other people are going through this as well. And why should I feel bad about it? Because everyone else is going through it as well. So I struggled with that and ended up taking a job for a company that was going to move me to Ohio, kind of in your neck of the woods, Ohio, Michigan area. Ended up not happening. I ended up taking the job for a few months. It didn't work out. Ended up getting another job that moved me from Las Vegas up to Utah, where I'm at now. Great company. I worked for that company for a year. Fantastic company. Totally out of the realm of what I've done before. So it's kind of having to reinvent myself. And then I found podcasting, and I found telling stories and hearing people's stories is kind of what happened. And I found a love for it. I love hearing people's stories. I love being able to be a spot where people can tell their story and tell kind of what they're going through, and being able to, kind of listen to those and just be a person that they can talk to and I can listen. And I find joy in that, and I love that. And so now it's made me realize that it's not always about just what our careers are and what we're doing. There's more to it than that. And I think I've gained a greater appreciation for my family. I think I've gained a greater appreciation for a lot of things. So that's kind of who I am, and kind of a quick nutshell, I guess, of who I am and what I've been doing.
I think there's a lot of great parallels that a lot of people can benefit from and also utilize to really understand where they're coming from and where life has kind of taken them out of that story. Because, yeah, we all went through COVID where we all hit that brick wall and had to figure out who we were. We had to spend time with ourselves, which was drastically uncomfortable for most of us. And a lot of us probably feel like we're still stuck in that. Who am I? Trying to define that. Picking up new hobbies, playing with this and that, realizing it don't work, putting it down, and just feeling discouraged. But I feel like as you've been able to talk through the podcast journey with people, it's given you this different vocabulary that you're able to almost sift through and pull out the actual authentic Jake.
I would agree with that. I agree with that because I feel like for me, it was a totally different thing. Like all of a sudden, okay, now I'm applying for jobs that can't be in trade shows or conventions because that's not happening anymore. And I'm like, who am I? Because that's what I know. That's what I do. So it's so hard to get myself out there to try to do other things. So I feel like when I listen to these podcasts, I don't know. I think maybe and I think I got a little bit of a special gift that I'm able to just listen and enjoy hearing what people say. And I, don't want to jump in on top of them or go over what they're saying because I enjoy hearing people's stories. But yeah, every episode I do, every person I talk to, I'm gaining something from them. Just like our conversation that you and I had, I gained something from that. I gained something from every single one. I've recorded yesterday with a young lady who's running track and does it unattached, not with an NCAA group or anything like that. And she was fantastic, and I learned some things from her. She's a lot younger, but I learned things. Older, younger, black, white, whatever. I'm learning something from everybody. It's awesome.
It reminds me a lot actually of an episode that I just did about the story about the Panther hunter from the old Cherokee legend, where he went through and he was out on a hunt and he got attacked by a panther, and to save his life, he offered to hunt during the winter months for the panthers and leave them some food so they wouldn't starve. And when he came back to his village, he had become a successful hunter, and they were excited that they had somebody that could hunt. He took everybody out in the town to teach them how to hunt, and it was too hard for them, so they stopped. He became the only actual hunter in the village, and over the course of time, as everybody in his village got lazy, this other group come in and settled. He actually taught them how to hunt. They listened to him, and they engaged with him. Then when he finally ended up passing away, the people in his village started to starve because they never did that. And I feel like, as you listen to a podcast, whether you're the host or, you have a part in that episode or not, you get to listen in. You get to really dial in and pick up some of those things that would go lost if they weren't documented. And those are important things that help us to bridge gaps within our own lives, which is what makes podcasting so rewarding.
Absolutely. That's the biggest reward from it is when I'm actually doing what I'm doing right now. Like you and I are face to face here talking. Yeah, it's virtual, you're on a screen, but you got the fire and everything going right there. So you're right there. And when I get to do that with people and actually hear them and talk to them and see what they're sharing with me, every episode there's something I gain from it. No doubt. I mean, I learned things that whether it's about them or a way they handled a situation or even funny things. Sometimes they tell funny stories and learning how they deal with like little mishaps and things like that. And man, it's incredible. The different people that I've had, it's awesome. Like I cannot get enough of it. And I get excited. I don't know if you can hear my voice, but I really get excited when I get to have these conversations with people. So it's been a huge blessing to me that I've found this because I was just kind of going through, what I'm supposed to do. That's kind of what I've always, done my whole life. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a career, do what you're supposed to do, support your family. I'm totally for that. I'm still supporting my family to this day, but it's nice that I found something for me, especially during a time when I was questioning everything. And I was like, what is going on in the world and this COVID thing? And now I can't, they're basically saying that my job's not important enough to work. And, it was a trying time. So having this podcast has been such a blessing.
And that's where it gets cool and, helpful for the listener too, I feel. Because, as I mentioned about that story, you may not have been the active person out there trying to learn how to hunt like a panther, but you're able to listen into the conversation. You get to explore all these cool ideas vicariously through the conversation that's going on. And that's where it raises these difficult questions within your mind that you can sit down and meditate about, or you can sit down and journal on in order to sort out how it does impact who you are. And it does. It provides little waypoints along the map that lead you towards your purpose. Like you said, with your original job, when COVID happened and they told you it wasn't important anymore, I'm sure that hit somewhere deep inside you, made you question your self worth, your self value. And then you get into podcasting and you start talking to different people and hearing about their experiences. It brings you back to yourself, and you realize I still have a voice. I'm still important, and all these thoughts and ideas that are rustling around that may seem insignificant in my head, they can help somebody else that's out there in the world that just happens to stumble on it.
Without a doubt. I still remember, it had been about a month or so after the whole, getting furloughed and not having a job. And I went to this little mountain kind of close to where we live. It's just, and it has a trail that goes up. It's not very big, a bunch of people go up it. And I remember hiking up this trail, and I was just by myself because I was kind of just deep in thought and trying to figure out what I was doing. And I remember getting to the top, and it kind of overlooks Las Vegas. This is when I lived in Las Vegas at the time. You kind of see Vegas. And I got up there, and I just remember just feeling defeated. Like you said, like my self confidence was like, man, they're telling me this job, it's not important enough, but that's what I did. And I really was feeling defeated, kind of feeling sorry for myself. And I remember just coming down off that mountain, just like, man, what am I going to do? And the cool part about this, finding this podcast too, is it's an adventure podcast. If you look up Journey with Jake, it's going to say adventure podcast. I'm not I'm not jumping out of airplanes. I'm not, diving under the water. I'm not scuba. I enjoy some of those things, but I'm not totally into it. But I'm talking to people who are. And you mentioned living vicariously too. Absolutely, I am. Talking to someone who's motorcycling his way from California to Brazil, I'm living it with him while he's telling me these stories. Talking about a father who's going on trips with his kids, just individually, I'm living it with him. Someone paramotoring, I'm living it with him. I mean, it's incredible the things that I can learn from that. Even though I'm not doing it myself, it brings out an adventure side of me, and it's pushed me to do things that I haven't done before. I've always been a runner, for example. I've always run in the morning. It's something I like to do to kind of help. It's my morning cup of coffee is what I tell people, to go run in the morning. And I've had a few runners on the show, but I've had like ultra runners, guys who are running 100 miles, stuff that I never knew people even did, but they're doing it. And I'm talking to them, and it's incredible the stories they have and what they're experiencing out on the trail and pushing their bodies and things like that. So I thought, okay, well, hey, if they're doing that, maybe I can push a little further. So I've done a couple of half marathons. Nothing compared to 100 miles, 13 miles versus 100, but it's helped me push myself a little bit more and more. It doesn't have to be some crazy, you got to go out and, scuba dive in Antarctica or anything like that. But maybe it helps you push a little more, like, hey, I can do a little extra step here at work, or I can do a little something here at home. Maybe you can find your own adventure. And to me, that brings enjoyment as well.
And that ties in a lot to the spirituality aspect of what I do with the project, because I focus on not only the adventure, but I focus on the fact that you can really take control of the pen and you can write the story. I use the metaphor a lot of, I'm sure this dates both of us, but growing up, we had the choose your own adventure book where you would read a chapter and then it'd be like, turn to this page, trying to go here. And that's what makes life fun. That's what makes life worth living. But on the other hand, how it applies in our lives now is, we pick up a podcast or we pick up a book and we listen to the subject matter and we feel like we're an authority on it afterwards. But we never think about how that actually applies to the steps that we're walking. And when you put in the physical aspect, you get out on a trail, you go out, you run, you swim, whatever it may be, you live life. You put those ideas that you just read in a book into practice. You're able to evaluate, hey, this idea this guy had here, does that really work in my life? Does that really help me to go forward, but it also opens up a mirror because you're able to look back on your life in a different perspective. And when you reflect on it like that, it helps you to see that whatever you're dealing with right now, you're prepared. You're struggling with it because you're not giving yourself the grace to understand that the strength is within you. You're always looking externally for it. And when you hear conversations like this, you put those things into practice, you realize, man, 5 years ago I faced the same sort of obstacle that I'm facing now. It was different. I got through it then. I'm strong enough to do it now.
Without a doubt, and I look back on things, the things that I went through, and I thought I could definitely attack it in a different way. And I've learned things, just the preparing for these half marathons. It took me more than what I had done in the past. I had to take an extra step to do things. And I give a lot of credit to the podcast for helping me do that. I would have never had set goals like that. I talked to a lot of people who set goals. People who run 100 miles, they have to set goals. They have to set, I got to do this much first. And then I got to, and incremental steps too. It doesn't just happen immediately. I think that's the thing I've learned too, that things aren't just going to come immediately. I've got to take it line upon line. And that's tough at times when you're dealing with stuff and it's a struggle and things aren't looking good. It's hard to have that patience to be like, it's going to be okay. This too shall pass. It's going to be okay. But it's tough when you're dealing with in the middle of that. And I look at so many different examples of different things too, not just, the physical things of the adventure side. I've talked to a lot of people who, talk about spirituality, and I don't like talking to you. I still remember your story about being on that mound cemetery and the feeling that you had there being on that mound and what came to you. So I think, okay, well, maybe I can find a place like that for me where I can get out and meditate, ponder, talk to God, whatever it may be, and find that as well. And so I've learned things like that as well, not just the physical things like, oh, maybe I can get out and run, to go 100 miles someday or something like that. It's also the little spiritual things, or maybe the little life lessons, the mental things that people pick up along the way that I've been picking up as well.
We talk so much about the goals, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people from outside of the United States, which kind of changed a lot of how I view goals and relationships to life, because they do a lot of the like triathlon type stuff, and you know how consuming that can be, but they don't allow that goal of completing it to become the definition of the reason that they're out there moving and making the steps to go forward. They look at it as more of, these are just higher footsteps, higher steps along the staircase that I would love to achieve. And when I do, it's going to give some satisfaction and it's going to teach me a lesson. That's something I feel like a lot of our society nowadays, we really skip over. We don't look at what we're able to learn. And that gets back to these podcast conversations and getting that new perspective. It becomes something that shifts because it's somebody else's little life lesson that they've learned, and you're pulling it into your vision based on your perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I think I sometimes sit and look at what someone's talking to me about, and I'm sitting there talking to somebody who's doing something crazy, scuba diving in Antarctica, for example. I'm probably not going to be doing that anytime soon. But the processes that they take, I always say in my podcast, I always, at the end, at the beginning, I always say it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey, because that's exactly it. It's that whole journey of getting to Antarctica to go scuba diving, what it took to get there, the whole journey it took to, ride your motorcycle across China, and how it started, and the things that happened along the way. So it is. It's those little incremental steps. And as I'm listening to these folks talk and tell their story, I'm just gaining so much from it. And I'm gaining these little steps that I can take and little things I can take. And it's definitely not about the final end game destination. It's definitely the things that are happening along the way, and that's been that's been awesome. It's been rewarding.
I love the way that you put that because when I think about looking off in the distance and I see a tree and I try to calculate how many steps it's going to actually get there, take me to get there, I wonder a lot of the time, is it really about the number of steps or is it just about enjoying the process of getting out there? And it always comes back to enjoying the process because I know there's going to be something that I'm going to experience, which is going to add not only skills to my backpack through life, but it's also going to add to the overall story that I get to tell.
Yeah, I used to be the type that would always look for the next thing. I was always, all right, as soon as when I'm in high school, okay, as soon as I get through with my freshman year, then things will be good because now I've had a year under my belt. And then, so, boom, I'm in my sophomore year. Okay, now once I'm an upperclassman, then things will be better. And then, you get to be an upperclassman. Okay, once I graduate, then I'll have things figured out. And I always was kind of looking at that high school, college. I served a church mission, and even that was kind of like, okay, once I do this and I pick up the language, then I'll be able to do. Instead of just sitting back, taking a minute to actually just enjoy what was going on in the present time. I've done that way too much in my life where I've just constantly looked ahead to the next thing instead of enjoying what I've done. I just had a conversation with a guy who he has a guide company for watching sharks, like going out in the ocean and swimming with sharks without cages and things. And he goes, the thing when you're with those sharks is you have to be present. You have to be focused on what's happening then and there. You can't be thinking, okay, when this is done, we can do that. You have to be focused because those sharks don't care. They're swimming around you. They don't, you got to be focused on them. And that made me think, it's like, you're absolutely right. I got to be more present. And that's something that's hard for me to do is be more present. That's why I enjoyed talking to you because I think through meditation and things like that, that helps me get grounded. And I've picked up some meditation over the last few years. I'm not a professional at it, but I do my own little 5 to 10 minute thing in the morning. That's it. But being more present, I think is huge. And yeah, enjoying those steps along the way, and not just how many steps or what it's going to take to get there.
You bring up such an important point, though, when it comes to the world of meditation, because a lot of people really think it's got to be you shave your head, you sit down for like hours on end and this and that. When in all reality, I found it based off of something that I love. And there's been the formal training, but where it really resonates is just finding the comfort space that's unique to me. And that's where being mindful, being present, even though it's challenging for most of us are afraid of it, you can find comfort. Just bringing it back home into that simple little space that's you.
Yeah, and that's tricky for me. I think sometimes. I mean, I'm going to ask you this question because I got you here, and I know you're good at meditating and everything. And what is it? Is there any kind of? And I don't want to say trick. Any kind of? I mean, what's a good way to kind of get in that frame of mind to where you can be present if you want to meditate? I guess.
So I would go with a lot of the practice that I do with people and even with myself is I'll get out on a trail and I'll start hiking. I'll start what's called walking meditation, where you focus on the simple feeling of when your foot hits the ground. You feel that support, you start to get yourself coming into the moment a lot simpler and a lot easier. And the reason I do that is you can do that anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're out in the wilderness or you're in the office, you're at home, get up and walk around a little bit. Just focus on the feelings, let things start to naturally flow. And then you're able to sit down and start to bring yourself into a classic sitting meditation where you're already feeling the flow. So you bring yourself more and more in tune to the moment. And 9 times out of 10 for me, at the end of that sitting moment, I'm getting up and I'm still carrying on with the hike or whatever activity I may be doing at the moment. But it brings you a lot more present that way. still with me? Jake, you still there?
This meeting is being recorded. To give you more edit
All right. Little editing going on. That's all right though.
to do.
Let's see. You
About
froze up
that.
again.
There you are.
All right, cool.
Yeah, you're a little frozen too. It's saying low bandwidth. It looks like, there you
Yeah.
are. You're back. We're
All
back.
right. Good to go. All right.
Perfect.
So I don't know. Did you catch that part about working into meditation?
Yeah, so I mean, I like what you said about getting out and maybe walking around a little bit, just kind of focusing on your steps. That's awesome. I've never even thought of that because sometimes I try to just I do a little morning routine, and so I try to include meditation in part of it. Sometimes I just kind of start with that. I think maybe probably help me to maybe do that. Take a chance to maybe walk around for a minute and kind of see what that does. So I think that's great advice. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. That's where a lot of stepping outside of the preconceived notions with what meditation is and what it's got to look like really becomes helpful. Because if you understand and really take the time to lean into the idea that a meditation practice is meant to be personal, then you start to find different things that work for you because you become more willing to explore.
Yeah, I think definitely. And the fun part is I've done a few guided ones too, where someone's kind of guided me along. That's helped me too because I feel like my mind is, I think a lot of us are like that. I think our minds are just going crazy all the time. It's hard to sometimes just calm it down. And so when I have something kind of, guiding me along the way, that helps. That for me, that helps. And then I can try different ones, different types, different things to focus on, different things like that. And I agree with you. I think it's kind of a personal thing. I've had some times where I'm meditating and I really feel just really good or really happy, almost to the point of, like, euphoric sort of, and then other times not as much. So I don't. It's an incredible thing, meditation. It really is. It's powerful.
If I've learned over the years just how powerful it can be and how much it can help you to open up different aspects of yourself. But I remember back before I became open to it, the idea that it it doesn't do a whole lot, or having in the early days the expectation that I'm always going to get that euphoric kind of feeling off of it. But the more you play around with it, the more you realize that over time, it's just like anything else. It's going to give you different reactions, different responses based on where you're at each day. And giving yourself that understanding, I think, is something you really pick up off of through guided meditation. Because it is hard at times to slow yourself down. And if you have somebody talking you through it and helping you work your way there, it relieves a lot of the stress, a lot of the pressure that we bring into the idea of meditating.
Yeah. without a doubt, because I know the times where I've tried to kind of just do it on my own. Next thing you know, I don't know how, I'm even a minute or two, I'm like, wait a minute, why am I even thinking of, I'm totally off, off somewhere else. So the idea that someone can help with that and guide along that, and it takes that pressure off, 100%. I agree with that wholeheartedly on that for sure.
And then, as you go through, and especially when you're following the guided meditation route, you tend to open yourself up more and more to experiencing different things, checking out different avenues, different paths toward essentially the same thing. So I feel like a lot of the experience through a meditation journey is more about learning how to let go of labels and preconceived notions and sitting with yourself in a more comfortable sort of environment, which also broadens the world around you, and it expands that vocabulary as we get back to the beginning of the conversation that helps you to progress forward in life.
Yeah, you're right, because I know, like with my running, for example, and I've had to go on a few long runs. I like to get into a moment where I'm running, where I'm kind of even meditating. Now, yeah, granted, I have to be focused so I don't trip or whatever the case may be, see where I'm going. But I've enjoyed kind of get into a little bit of meditation while I run, just to kind of change things up a bit and focus on things that are good for me to focus on at the time. And it varies every time I do it. And I don't do it every time, but sometimes it just kind of comes naturally, or I think about it, I'm like, hey, let's focus here for a minute. I'm just meditating a little bit, even while I'm running, and you're kind of doing two things at once. But I do like the fact that you don't have to be, preconceived notions of what meditation is. I used to think it's woo woo, and you'd sit in a dark room, and I don't know, chanting. I don't know, that kind of thing. It can be totally, doesn't have to be like that. I guess is what I'm saying. It does not have to be like that, and I've learned that as I've been working on that myself, and I'm excited for it because I know it's something I can keep working on. It'll never be something that I'll perfect, and I can just keep working towards it.
And that's the fun part. That's the important part of it, is when you let go of those preconceived notions. And I was laughing because, as I shared with you before, my experience of how I got into meditation, after the conversation and going out and picking up my crossbow, realizing, dude, shooting is exactly that. And being okay with taking it into a space that I was comfortable in, and realizing that this is a long term journey that I'm taking. There's no short term answers, but every step of the way is going to open me up to something new, and that's going to help me to fill my heart and ultimately bring my voice forward and express the most authentic version of myself.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Everything I pick up, everything I learn and grow from, is just making me a better person. All the people I talk to, the things I learn, talking to you about meditation right now, it's awesome because I'm going to learn some things, and I'm going to have a little bit of a different focus when I try to meditate next time. And I mean, it's great. And I love being able to, find a place that's comfortable for me and what works for me. And it's going to be different. It's going to be different from you. It's going to be different from Joe next door or whoever. It's going to be different. I appreciate that. And I like the fact that we all are different. And that's why I love doing this so much, because we all are different, and there's things I'm learning and growing from everybody.
What comes to mind as we talk through this is really, through meditation, you learn probably one of the most difficult things that we're taught to really understand and express, is that individuality that we each have. We're taught in the world to grow up, get a job, get the white picket fence, have a family, and everything is just laid out stereotypically. It's very generic. But as you explore your meditation practice and you become more comfortable in it, it it changes the direction of that light from that cookie cutter, I'm just doing the American dream, I'm just doing what I'm taught, to all of a sudden I'm really embracing who I am. I'm learning more and more about myself. I'm learning that idea of self-love, self-care, and it's making it more comfortable for me to not only express all of that and live in the moment, but it's helping me to reach those goals. It's helping me to contribute to that big picture that I was taught to be a part of as a kid in a much more impactful way that's filled with really a much deeper intent.
Yeah, when I focus on taking care of myself and make myself a better person, that individuality, those other things that I thought were the way it was supposed to be, the job and the family and and those are important. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like when I take care of myself and I make myself better and find my own individuality, I'm better at those other things. I feel like I'm better at my job. I feel like I'm a better husband, a better father as I take care of myself, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. But for me, that's what it's done. I feel like, and I feel like part of that it could mean therapy. I went to therapy a couple summers ago for a couple sessions, and that was big for me. And people look at me like this guy, like people don't know. They think you got everything together, but I was struggling with some things mentally and things like that, and being able to just go put myself out there, that was a huge help. It was such a huge help. So yeah, I think that's important. Taking care of yourself, finding that individuality will then help the other aspects of your life.
I think you raise a very important point there because I get a lot of that myself, especially when I give talks on other podcasts and so on and so forth. Here I am, you know, doing the meditation thing, but yet I'm decked out in camo and, I look like I belong in the backwoods, not sitting on a mat or whatever the case may be. But the cool thing is that I've figured out how to bridge that gap. I got rid of all those different labels that people put around different things, like the wild bushcrafting Mike shouldn't be able to do this or he shouldn't be doing that because he's too busy worrying about, you know, where the next trail is gonna take him or whatever. But when you bring all that together, you really do realize that all the challenges and all the struggles in the world are self-inflicted because we're so uncomfortable with all these different things. And I think that that's probably one of the most intriguing things that this podcast journey has brought to my doorstep. Because I actually just did a conversation where somebody was like, so you don't look like the kind of guy that would go into therapy or let alone sit down and meditate. But yet here you are and it's made such an impact on your life. And I love being able to give those kind of examples. And even to somebody that they're not bringing that curiosity to the table, they're stuck in the ways that they've been taught. You can impact them the exact same way. I was doing a roundtable conversation with this guy that recently he had, what did he have? He battles bipolarism, and apparently what he was taught was to shy away from it, to hide, to mute his voice because that label is so different. And halfway through that conversation, I had to hit him with that question: why are you muting your voice and telling other people to mute theirs? Why not enjoy and celebrate that individuality? Because that is what makes you you. In my case, major depression, major anxiety, those labels are what's been tacked to my story. But without embracing any of that, Project Mindfully Outdoors would not exist today. And let alone some of the adventures that I've gone on, some of the people that I've worked with, and the lives that I've impacted. And a lot of the time, I bring it down to kind of touching on Daniel Boone's story. He was credited for as a founding father of our country. And in reality, when you look back at his memoirs and, recorded words that he's said, if you think about that in the context of today's world, he was running because of social anxiety. You think about it like that, because a lot of what he accredited or people accredit him to his continue to push on was because he felt like he was running out of shoulder room. People were getting too close. He couldn't breathe. What is social anxiety? Just
Yeah.
because we don't have the wild frontier anymore, now we've got a negative stigma around it.
Yeah. That's so true. I still remember, oh, this was a couple of years ago, but I remember I was struggling. I was back in the trade show industry again after the pandemic, but I remember it was hard getting back into that whole environment again because I'm like, man, it was tough. And I remember struggling, and one of my coworkers reached out to me and was talking to me about an event we had coming up together. And I remember I was kind of telling him, my struggles, and I was dealing with some anxiety and just I was really having some issues. And I remember he told me, well, and I saw him a few weeks later. He said, it really just surprised me because I looked at you as someone who always had it together. And I didn't realize that you were going through your own trials. And I told him how I was going to go to therapy. And it's been awesome because now that I opened up to him about that, I was able to kind of talk him through some things later when he was having some struggles. And so, yeah, without a doubt, don't hide any of that. You know, find the help that you need. Do what you got to do. Had your bouts with depression, anxiety. Yeah, figure out a way to talk about it and make it work, even if it means you have to get some therapy. So what? I know, but when I was a kid, no one ever talked about that. Like that was like taboo. You didn't talk about, oh, that person's going to therapy. That was never talked about. But now it's much more common, and it's not a taboo thing. I don't feel like. So yeah, if you need to get help, you need to work some things out. By all means, let's do it. Let's get out there and talk and show who we are. I love it.
I love that. I mean, that is really one of the most important sentiments. And, we look at a lot of the heroes of, throughout history, and they all get back to the same principle of regardless of what that obstacle is, which in this substance, we're talking about those negative labels that people put on us. Regardless of the obstacle becomes the way. Every successful hero journey takes just that. When you start at the beginning of the story, there's the challenge that overcomes them and knocks them on their ass. Then they go through the bulk of the story and the journey, learning how to battle that, how to tame or overcome it. And then finally you see it in action. And we lose sight of that in today's world. We really do. We like to distract ourselves. We're
Hmm.
encouraged to distract ourselves from those challenging moments that would help us to grow. And to go all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, this is what podcasts in the post COVID era have become. They become a platform for these hard conversations. Guys like you and I, we do these things that end up benefiting us, but we're also hoping that it opens the door and continues the conversation within the listener's world
Yeah,
so that
without a
they can
doubt.
continue forward.
Absolutely. And I joke about that sometimes when I'm talking to people because I'll be talking to someone. I'll be like, man, I'm so glad I'm talking to you because I don't know if it's benefiting anybody else, but it's benefiting me. Hopefully, there's a few listeners out there that it's benefiting as well. So that's absolutely true. I'm trying to keep that going, trying to share the challenges and the difficulties we have to keep that conversation going. Again, I can see kind of numbers, how many people are listening, but I don't know who's taking what from it. That's kind of the neat part about podcasting in a way, is that I don't know what's coming from it. You hope it hits somewhere and impacts somebody. But for me, it's been huge. It's been a huge benefit. I learn something all the time, and it does, it keeps that conversation going. And I always look forward to the next one, because I'm like, what am I going to learn today? I've got so and so who sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. What am I going to learn from them today? What challenges did they have? How did they overcome them? And it just keeps on and on it goes, and it's so rewarding and so awesome being part of it.
It's when you start to shift away from the fear of those hard conversations that I feel you really become a fan of the morals, or the deeper meaning of the conversation, because you find your own context within it. I think about really the most impactful episode of a podcast I ever listened to, where Ryan Holiday and Ben O'Brien were talking about Stoic philosophy with this idea of promoting a book, but that it could be relevant within the hunting community. And lo and behold, I had just stumbled my way back to my truck moments before, after a blocked suicide attempt. And I took the context of that conversation as something that was an invitation to relearn how to turn toward life instead of trying to run away and get away from it. And those are the hard conversations that we find internally are sparked by a conversation such as this. And that right there, regardless of what it's doing for you and I, that kind of energy that gets put out into the world is what makes all of this worthwhile. It's what makes it needed.
Amen, brother. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. It's so true. It is. And I'm so blessed that you're here, because you had that botched attempt. You wanted to take your life. You wanted to run away from it. And if you hadn't been here, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now doing this. I would have had you on my podcast. They're so thankful that you're here, Mike. And this is awesome.
I greatly appreciate that. And there's so much that gets lost because we lose that hope. And I feel like more that we play around through different podcasts or picking up a book, we reignite that voice. And that's what all of us are trying to do for the community. And as the fire starts to burn down here, that's who I want to have you talk to for a couple of minutes. And that person that is lost their voice and become aware of that loss, but yet they're trying to uncover a new way to express their heart, express their voice, and turn toward life again. Offer them some tips, tricks, and inspiration for that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is, no matter who you are, no matter what situation you're in, you have a story to tell. And your story, I want to hear that story. I'm someone who wants to hear it, and that means other people want to hear it. So don't be afraid to tell your story. Don't minimize it. Don't say, oh, well, it's nothing, because I tend to do that. That's something I've tended to do. So tell your story, be who you are. And I think that's the biggest thing. And someone will be out there to listen. It may have to be through prayer. Maybe, you might be in a spot where you're not with somebody. Maybe you have to talk to God about it. Maybe you have to talk to the woods, meditate about it, but tell your story, because it's important. We want to hear it. I know I want to hear it for sure. It's important to tell your story. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say is, don't be afraid to tell your story. Someone's going to learn from it, and it might be yourself.
I think that was beautiful, but there was an important thing that you spoke in there, because I'm guilty of it myself. It's playing off what we do as no big deal. Every moment that we live everything that we achieve and every footstep that we make is a cause for celebration. That's something that I've struggled to learn, and I still have my moments that I have to remind myself of. But each single step toward that big giant oak tree that's off in the distance is an opportunity to celebrate. And I think that's a beautiful note to hand it over to you to do all that shameless plugging of what you got going on, where people can get a hold of you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks for letting me be here with you. This has been awesome to sit around the campfire. This is great. I'm not there with you, but I can smell the smoke. I mean, I feel like I am. So thank you so much for that. It's fantastic. Yeah. So Journey with Jake, you can find it any major, podcast platform. Journey with Jake. It's an adventure podcast, but it's more than that. It's like we said, it's your journey. It's who you are. It's your story. So come check it out. There's something for everybody on there. Whether you like certain types of adventures or not, there's probably something that you'll find that, and it's regular everyday folks. It's not crazy people who are, doing crazy things. It's just regular everyday folks who have their story to tell, and that's what it's about. So yeah, check it out. JourneyWithJake.net for the website, Journey with Jake podcast on Instagram. Check it out. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
Jake, thanks. It's always a pleasure to get to connect with you and have these conversations like this. I feel like we get something important out there into the universe every time we do. So this has been great. Thank you for the time. We don't believe in goodbyes. So until we meet again, whether it's this journey or the next, happy and safe travels.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Awesome. That was fun.